Most people spend their entire working life saving for retirement without ever knowing the one number that actually determines whether their money lasts or runs out. Not how much they have in the bank, not how much their house is worth. One specific number that almost nobody calculates until it's too late, and by then the damage is already done. If you're retired right now, or within 10 years of retiring, the next few minutes could be the most important financial conversation you have this year, because the answer is almost certainly different from what you've been told. Let's start with the myth that's costing retirees more money than almost any other financial belief out there. Most people think that if they've saved a large enough lump sum, they're safe. $1 million, 2 million, whatever the number is in their head, they believe that once they hit it, the hard part is over. But the hard part isn't accumulating the money. The hard part is making it last 20, 25, sometimes 30 or more years after you stop working, while inflation keeps raising the cost of everything you buy, while healthcare expenses climb year after year, and while your savings sit exposed to a market that can drop 30% in a matter of months. The lump sum is not the answer. The question is how long it lasts, and that depends on something most people never calculate before they retire. Here's the real number you need to understand. It's called your withdrawal rate, and is the percentage of your total savings you take out every year to live on. If you have $1 million saved and you withdraw $50,000 a year to cover your expenses, that's a 5% withdrawal rate. Sounds simple, but here's what makes this number the most important one in your entire retirement. If your withdrawal rate is too high, you will run out of money even if the market performs well. And if it's calibrated correctly, you can live comfortably for 30 years without ever touching the principal, because the returns on what remains keep refilling what you take out. The most widely studied guideline in retirement planning is what's known as the 4% rule, developed from decades of research on market returns and retirement outcomes. It says that if you withdraw 4% of your savings in the first year of retirement and adjust that amount each year for inflation, your money has historically lasted at least 30 years in the vast majority of scenarios, across bull markets and bear markets, across recessions and recoveries. That means if you have $500,000 saved, 4% is $20,000 a year. If you have 1 million, it's 40,000. If you have 2 million, it's 80,000. That's the annual income your savings can reliably produce without the principal running out before you do. But here's where it gets more complicated and more important, especially for people who are already retired or very close to it. The 4% rule was built on a specific set of assumptions that may not perfectly match your situation. It assumes a 30-year retirement. If you retire at 62 and live to 95, you're looking at a 33-year runway, and the math gets tighter at every year beyond 30. It also assumes a specific portfolio mix of stocks and bonds that stays relatively consistent over time, and it was calculated during periods of higher interest rates than some years have seen, which means in certain economic environments, the safe number is actually closer to 3 to 3.5%, not 4. If you're getting value from this and want to keep learning exactly how to protect what you've built, subscribe to this channel right now. Every single week, I post content specifically built for people in or near retirement. Practical strategies for making your money last, protecting your savings, and making smart financial decisions in this stage of life. This is the channel built for you, not for 20-year-olds learning about money for the first time. Now here's the part nobody talks about when they discuss the 4% rule, and it might be the most important thing in this entire video. The rule tells you how much you can safely withdraw, but it doesn't tell you how much you actually need. And those two numbers can be very different. Most pre-retirees dramatically overestimate how much they'll spend in retirement in some categories and dramatically underestimate in others. Research consistently shows that retirees actually spend less on things like transportation, clothing, and entertainment in the early years of retirement than they expected. But they spend far more on healthcare than almost anyone plans for. The numbers on healthcare in retirement are genuinely shocking if you haven't looked at them recently. A couple retiring today at 65 can expect to spend, on average, somewhere between $300,000 and $350,000 on healthcare costs over the course of their retirement, and that's above and beyond whatever government or insurance coverage they have. That's not a lump sum you pay at once. It's a steady rising cost that increases every year as you age, and it's the single biggest wild card in any retirement budget. If your retirement plan doesn't specifically account for healthcare cost escalation, you are almost certainly underfunded even if the top-line savings number looks fine. There's also a pattern in retirement spending that most people don't expect and that almost no financial plan accounts for. Retirement spending doesn't stay flat. It actually moves in a shape that researchers call the retirement spending smile. In the early years of retirement, spending tends to be higher because people are healthier, more active, traveling, pursuing things they delayed during their working years. Spending then typically drops in the middle years as activity levels naturally slow down. And then in the late years, spending rises sharply again, driven almost entirely by healthcare and long term care costs. If your retirement plan assumes a flat monthly budget from age 65 to age 85, it's built on an assumption that almost never matches reality. So, what does this mean in practical terms for someone who is already retired or planning to retire within the next few years? It means the number you need isn't a single lump sum with a single withdrawal rate applied for 30 years. It's a plan with three distinct phases that accounts for higher activity spending early, lower spending in the middle, and a healthcare reserve for the later years. And it means your withdrawal strategy needs to be flexible, not locked in at whatever rate you started with, because the market, inflation, and your actual spending will all move over time. Here's the most practical version of the calculation, simplified into something you can actually do today. Take your expected annual expenses in retirement, including an honest estimate of healthcare costs, not just your current healthcare bills, but a number that grows 3 to 5% per year. Divide that number by 0.04, which is the 4% rule in reverse. The result is the approximate total savings you need to sustain that lifestyle indefinitely. If your annual expenses in retirement are $60,000, you need $1.5 million. If they're $40,000, you need $1 million. If they're $80,000, you need $2 million. Write that number down. Then compare it honestly to what you have or what you're on track to have. The gap between those two numbers is the most important financial fact in your life right now. If that calculation surfaced a gap you weren't expecting, the worst thing you can do is ignore it. The second worst thing is panic. The most useful thing is to understand that the gap tells you exactly what to work on, whether that's adjusting your expected expenses, working a few more years, adding a part-time income source in early retirement, or restructuring how your savings are invested to generate more reliable income. None of those adjustments are out of reach, but none of them happen by accident either. The people who run out of money in retirement almost never saw it coming from a distance. They had a number in their head, they hit it, they retired, and then 10 or 15 years in, the math stopped working, and by then the options for fixing it had gotten much narrower. The people who don't run out of money aren't necessarily the ones who saved the most. They're the ones who understood their withdrawal rate, planned for healthcare costs honestly, and built flexibility into their spending instead of assuming everything would stay predictable. You now have everything you need to run this calculation for yourself. And if you want to go deeper on any piece of this, protecting your savings from a market drop, figuring out the smartest way to withdraw from your accounts, or understanding how to make your money generate income without drawing down the principal, every one of those topics is coming on this channel in the weeks ahead. Subscribe right now if you haven't already, because this channel is built specifically for people in or near retirement who want real, practical financial guidance, not generic advice designed for someone 30 years younger. Drop a comment below with the retirement expense you feel least prepared for, whether it's healthcare, inflation, or something else entirely, because your answer will shape exactly what I cover next.